Hey leaders, I want to present some of our philosophy of ministry, and it's centered around the metaphor and idea called the mountain house. It just means something to me. I love the idea of being in the mountains. If you spend time with me, you know that. So it could translate to a lot of things, but this is just the metaphor that we've come up with. So here's the mountain house. And what the mountain house metaphor is meant to demonstrate is that we're going to create a lot of different spaces within our ministry, different kinds of events, different kind of spaces, and we're going to fill them different ways. And the question is, how do I show up to each of these? Because depending on the space and the intention of it, I'll show up differently. And part of what we want to express is that everything that we do with students is on purpose. We do our events on purpose to show who Jesus is ultimately, but not always in the same manner. So the mountain house is 4 different environments primarily. So it's the wilderness, the mountain house, the river, and the compass. And I want to explain each of those spaces. And you'll notice there's an arrow between each one of them. And that word on there, you may not be able to see very well, is invitation. So in every space that we're in, there's always an invitation to the next. So let's just start with wilderness. The wilderness is a place where you meet someone who knows Jesus. So the idea is out and about, not at a location. This is during COVID, we did a lot of playing football in the park or going out beyond the walls of an actual physical building or someone's home even. So the idea of this, if you grew up in Young Life or familiar, it's what we call contact work. It's making time to be with students on their turf, in their places, meeting them out and about. So in a place that's not even necessarily a building. And here, like I said, you're going to meet someone who knows Jesus. So if you are showing up as a leader in that area, in that space, there's not an expectation that you are going to give a talk or maybe even pray for someone. You are showing up as a representative for Jesus. That a kid might be curious and it might be like, okay, I met that adult. That's so cool. That was a really kind person. Remember, we are carrying adults with compelling faith in the lives of students. There's one story when we did this for a while, this one kid kept coming, this kid Sam, and then after like 4 times he realized, he's like, oh, you guys are like a church. Oh, that's so awesome. And for a lot of kids, they don't have any familiarity with the church, or if they do, it might be negative. And so it's not that we're trying to be undercover, it's just that there's no pressure to try to put on a program when we're in that area. So this can look a lot of different ways. It could be showing up in the park with some of the guys or girls that you already know, and then you invite other folks, you see them out. It could be going to their show. A lot of you have gone to kids' performances, and when you're there, you meet a lot of other friends. It could be taking kids out for any kind of outing. So wilderness, that's one space. And again, the idea is you meet someone who knows Jesus. So the invitation from there is like, hey, it's great that we've seen you out in the park a lot. Do you know that we actually do stuff? We're part of this community called Trinity. We have TNL, we have Sunday mornings. Come check our stuff out. So the next idea is the mountain house. See the big welcome sign here? The mountain house is a place where everybody is welcome without condition, which is really many of our spaces. But the idea of welcome here is that you're going to be introduced to Jesus. This is our idea of belonging really is front and center. So anybody can walk in here, regardless of what your experience with church is before, with God. You have so many questions. You think Christians are all weird. We hope that we have a place where you would come and you feel like you could show up and people are going to treat you like you belong. And that's what y'all do so well as leaders. That's one of the hallmarks of our ministry. And in this space, so think TNL. TNL is a perfect mountain house space. We want to create a place where anybody could show up. And they're not just going to meet someone who knows and loves Jesus, but they're going to be introduced to who Jesus is. So we are going to explicitly present the gospel, but we're going to do it in such a way that we're not assuming anything about what you know. We're not going to assume you know all the stories. We're not going to assume you've been in church or understand how that works. So we're going to be careful to explain things. So if we're talking, if we're teaching from John, we're going to explain, oh, John was like a teenager when he experienced life with Jesus and he wrote it down later in his life. Isn't that so cool? So you might be able to relate as you hear this story. He was about your age. So we're going to really explain different pieces to make it relatable so that people can connect and engage with it. So again, places where we do this, TNL is a great example. But Sunday mornings to some extent are like that. And more we're realizing many of our students for many years now, the biblical literacy is pretty low. So we're not assuming anything about a kid's biblical literacy. We're going to present the story as if you've never heard it and as if church is a really foreign place to you. So that for sure is going to happen in a mountain house experience. Now, for the mountain house, if someone is showing up there and they seem to be really engaged, asking lots of questions, then we'd say, hey, come to the river. Now, we don't explicitly use that term for any of the things we do, but what the river represents is a place where you can be formed like Jesus. So if you imagine a stone with rough edges, it's placed in the river and it's smoothed out. It's a place to sit and be formed. We had a really great example, one of these spaces last summer with high school. We did an overnight, we just called it Formation Retreat. We at Trinity like to call things exactly what they are. Tuesday Night Live, right? Sunday morning youth. So this Formation Retreat was a place where you came to and you knew exactly what you were getting into. You knew that you were coming to a place to be formed in the image of Jesus. Whereas in the Mountain House, we're not that we're baiting and switching people. People are coming to the church. They understand we're going to talk about Jesus. But again, we do it in such a way that we don't know anything about your background. And we're making an initial invitation, whereas formed like Jesus, we're going to go a little further, faster with some of the language of formation. You might know a little bit more. And we're going to invite you to be formed explicitly. So on that Formation Retreat, I mean, we jumped in, we spent half an hour reading the Bible by ourselves. There was worship, and that was expected. And we didn't really have to explain our terms as much. And these places are really important because it's a place where, for a student, for anybody, regardless of who you are in a space like this, you are saying, I want to be discipled, and I am opting into that space. So that's the river. And the reality is, if this is like a clock, right, and here's 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock, Sunday morning youth fits somewhere. It's not quite the river because it still is like anybody could show up. We want to make sure that if someone is a complete outsider to the faith, that they would show up and be really comfortable there. So Sunday morning is somewhere down here, and TNL is a little closer to the Mountain House, but there's a bit of formation that we're inviting kids into here. So a pure formation space is one that, like, if you were brand new to the faith, you'd be like, what is going on here? A little bit. Even though maybe a kid would come there, who knows? All right, so then the last space is, all right, you're really tracking with being formed. We see that a kid is really owning their faith for themselves. There's an invitation to Compass, and the Compass is lead like Jesus. So this is full circle. So meet someone who knows and loves Jesus in the wilderness. You're invited to the Mountain House, introduced to Jesus explicitly. This is who Jesus is. And then you're invited to be formed like Jesus, and then invited to lead like Jesus. So we don't have anything that is explicitly this yet. However, in the last couple of years, we've more and more been inviting the high school students, especially, to lead with the younger kids. We've been equipping and empowering them. You see a couple of them leading now on Sunday mornings and being invited more and more to what we do with leaders, which I'm so excited about, to see kids get a vision for leading. Because once you have the tools and you're equipped and empowered to lead like Jesus, then the invitation is back to the wilderness, where you start inviting other folks to come hear the amazing story of the gospel. So that's the picture. And if we're going to add anything else to this, I would put a village right in the middle. This came out of recent conversations, that all of these, if these are like events that we put on, the hope is that it all feeds into ordinary time, that we are walking with our students, with the kids that we are leading through the ordinary times of their lives. And so the village to me would represent staying connected with kids through texts and through calls, through knowing what's going on in just the mundane parts of their lives. Because the reality is, we know we are doing our work well as leaders if kids understand and are demonstrating that when they have moments of celebration or stress, that their first turn is not just to their peers, but is also to caring adults with compelling faith. There's going to be a time when students aren't turning to their parents. They're necessarily going to differentiate away. And so we have a ministry. One of the big reasons is so that kids know that they're connected to a bigger story. And so we get to step into that place. So that would be the village right at the center of all this wilderness wandering. We have these awesome opportunities, on retreats. Retreats are going to fall somewhere in here. Our summer trips also will fall somewhere in the Mountain House, the river. There'll be some leadership opportunities, but everything should come back. It should be a faith you can bring home with you, and that we are walking with students in that place. So there's a couple words that sum all this up. Belonging. Every space, we want someone to feel like they belong, but we're going to show up differently, right? Belonging in the wilderness is being super kind and seeing and hearing somebody and making sure they're included. Belonging in the Welcome House is going to be welcome somebody to TNL or the Mountain House, making sure someone feels welcome there, no matter where they're coming from. In the river, Belonging is going to also be a bit of calling someone to something else, calling someone to challenge them, to be formed, and challenging them to lead here. So belonging, invitation, each space, having an eye out, like, hey, what kid might really be looking for a formation space or for a leadership opportunity? And then equipping, each step along the way, we want you to feel equipped to go into these different spaces, but also feel some of the students that they're equipped, and then empowered. We want you to feel empowered to walk into each of these, and that's why we're doing leadership things just like this. So thank you so much for leading with us. We just hope that this leaves you with an impression of intentionality with what we're doing with Trinity Youth, and we're so thankful to have you as part of the team. Peace be with you.